Starting this podcast was an unexpected step of obedience of something that God has called me to do. Through this podcast, I will be interviewing ordinary people who have seen and experienced God move in extraordinary ways throughout their lives. I pray that this will build your faith and encourage you to testify of God's goodness in your everyday lives. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Testify of God's Goodness podcast. So this is a part 2. We just paused it for a second and we're going to jump back in. So this time we're talking about, schools. So you said you have been a school teacher for 27 years now. So you kind of have learned the ins and outs of all of it and seen the impact and kind of the changes over the years as well. So what are some ways that our school system and families can work together to promote a total social emotional child? Because that was one of the things that that was one of the most important things to you, is seeing that happen in a child's life.
Well, and again, there's lots of different systems, and I've been very, very blessed to have been able to grow as an educator and as a teacher in Hampshire County for 27 years. My program, many people are proud of what that is and how that's become and how that
it's
continues.
Very hands-on too.
Yeah,
so talk a little bit about it if people don't know.
So, and you kind of have to back up a little bit, and I don't want to get into the point where I'm telling you how to build a clock when you really just want to know what time it is. But,
right.
I alluded to in the last episode that my dad passed away, will be now 18 years, and that's kind of when things really I started to think about it. I think as a teacher, regardless of what system you're in, you spend the first third of your career, however long that is, figuring out how to do things, like how to survive, how to do the things that teachers do, how to be a teacher. And then you spend the next third of your life getting everything that you think you need to be able to do what you need to do. And then I'm kind of in that last third, where I think I've gotten what I need in place so that I can grow. But when my dad passed, my dad was a graduate at Hampshire High School, and my grandfather had a massive heart attack when my dad was in the at that point, the 9th grade, which would have been at Romney Junior High.
Okay.
And so, and ended up passing later of an aneurysm. And my grandmother was a saint. She was the infirmary nurse at the Schools for the Deaf and Blind for many years. After my granddad's passing, she went back and became an LPN. And I always had kind of a heart because I heard the stories about how the community got behind her and encouraged her, Dr. Brown and some of the doctors in town about, encouraged her to go become an LPN. And so she did, and she worked at the hospital here in town. And when my dad passed, there was always that, as you I think when someone passes, we reevaluate someone's life and his body of work. And, and we had the conversation of, how would Dad's life, his life was what it was because that's what it had to be. That's what it was. It was God's plan for him to have a massive heart attack at 58 years old. But we started to reevaluate what is it that would have opened additional doors or changed things for my dad as, he got into adulthood. What would have steered him down a different path? And it was funny when I came here, my dad was kind of he had Dodge Darts and Corvettes, and he was kind of a little bit of a, he recruited my mom probably by, laying black marks in front of her house and showing off, and a lot of, have some funny stories about teaching and, coming in contact with people's children, and I have parents that have said, well, I learned to drive in your dad's Dodge Dart, and I've had their son in my class, and things like that. How would Dad's life have been different? And he grew up in Depot and down on Depot Street, had wonderful neighbors that looked after him and took care of his sister and my Uncle Gary, and made sure that my grandmother was taken care of, and my dad had gardens. They farmed the island at Harmison's, and, they had to really work for every piece they had, and our dad would often talk about Christmas and, how they would get a pair of socks and a shirt, and that was Christmas. And and Dad worked really hard. My mom and Dad worked very hard for the three of us to live on a farm,
Yeah.
to have a farm, to pay for the farm. They did without so we could have an experience working with animals. And I knew in my head that that was my dad's passion. It was
Yeah.
really his passion. But he had to come about that in his adulthood, not as a student at
Right.
Hampshire High School. And so when he passed away, we kind of got our heads together and we said, why don't we start, something to have animals on campus that would be there full time. And I was very fortunate at that time to have administrators who embraced the concept and embraced the idea. And, our first sow farrowed in the farrowing crate. We went to Pennsylvania Farm Show. Great ag teacher, Mark Hostutler, went with me. We picked her out. He's a great swine guy. Love still today asking questions to Mark about pigs, and
Yeah.
picked her out, brought her back. We bolted a farrowing crate to the little blue trailer, and we pulled her in and out of the shop every day with her babies, and that's how we started the program. And
Okay.
and it wasn't done so that kids, regardless of their what is happening at home, regardless of what is happening financially, regardless of what is happening, socially, emotionally, that students will have the opportunity to work with animals. Animals have an incredible way of educating and teaching
We do, yeah.
kids. And my program, I've been able to bring wonderful people through that journey into the table. The barn was designed by Temple Grandin. It was like, I had a wonderful co-teacher, Nancy Zabo, that had a severe and profound classroom. And, we went in the middle of an ice storm to southern West Virginia. The state director of special education's brother donated these 2 donkeys,
Oh, wow.
and
Yeah.
and they came to Hampshire High School, and in the joy that those donkeys and that learning brought to those children,
Yeah.
and brought to my students in the classroom was incredible. I mean, I remember the young gentleman who's now an adult, learning to walk. And I remember him pulling up one day and holding that donkey by the head and
Wow.
reaching up and kissing that donkey. He had no
So
control,
sweet.
couldn't walk. He would crawl and kiss that donkey in the middle of the forehead. And and the entire staff is bursting into tears. And I'm like, what are we crying for? He's like, he doesn't show any emotion to anything. This is the only time he's shown
Wow.
emotion to anything. He had a very, very tumultuous upbringing, and these donkeys related to him, and they just genuinely became his support piece.
That's so sweet.
And when he was done in the classroom, he grabbed the bucket, put it in his mouth, and out he would go. He was not going to be in the classroom anymore. So I have wonderful journeys with the animals and the kids. It doesn't fit into everybody's comfort zone, and I'll be the first to say that. When I first proposed the idea, a sow that weighs 450 pounds with 10 babies and a whole mouthful of teeth doesn't fit really tightly into Safe Schools Act. You
Yeah.
gotta give and take a little bit.
Yeah.
You gotta have in it, but the community embraces it. The community has always embraced it. They've always got behind it. They've always supported it. There's always been, kids, former students now who are, there's nothing any more warm and inviting than a kid saying, Mr. Lewis, this is my daughter, and I can't wait till she's in your program.
I'll
You know,
say
that
I want to
piece.
share a story with you too. So I remember, so I went through the program, and there was one day for whatever reason, because I had helped with delivering the baby pigs and stuff like that. Well, there was one day, and we had 4 ag teachers. All 4 ag teachers were out of the building, so we had all substitutes. The substitutes did not know how to deliver pigs. So I remember calling, getting a hold of you somehow, and I was like, look, this sow is going into labor. She wasn't back in where she needed to be. So you were like, okay, can you stay with her all day? So you ended up getting a hold of the principal and was like, hey, can Sarah just stay in the ag building or stay in the
Yeah.
barn for the day? And just being able to deliver, you're like, okay, just instruct people, tell them whatever they need to do. And so I was able to deliver those babies and make sure they were good and make sure, they were breathing correctly and doing all those things. And that learning experience for me, out of all the learning experiences or lessons that I was taught through school, that sticks out to me, and that will always stick out to me most, because it was such a cool experience. It was, you asking me to step up as a leader, you know, as probably, I don't know, a junior in high school, and being able to like teach my peers too a little bit about that stuff. Which I'm still not an expert on it, but that experience was so cool and that will stick with me. So I wouldn't have had that, like, because like you said on the first episode, we had lambs and cattle, and we had pigs just during like butchering season. We didn't really like raise them, or, you know, deal with like the baby piglets or anything like that. So I wouldn't have had that experience had it not been for that program. And I know like so many others have had. I remember seeing like the kids with you know, special needs and how excited they were. Like I did get to see them, you know, working with the donkeys and all. And yeah, so it is a special program that you are able to get started up for our county, for the high school.
it's really a unique thing, and one of the things is, you know, and again, you know, I am a very big advocate for Hampshire High School. I always have been, and I'm a very big advocate, you know, solely because that I feel like when I go to work there, that the people there, regardless of who they are, genuinely, you know, there's always going to be outliers and exceptions,
Right,
but
yeah.
they genuinely care about the kids that are in the building. And for me, you know, I'm not a watch Mr. Lewis work teacher. You know, there's a lot of teachers that have different styles, and this would be true across the country. What you're explaining to me tells me that at some point along the way, you had a toolbox that was full of the right tools. And that it was at that instant that you were able to access those tools, and
Right.
you were able to make decisions that ultimately ended up being positive.
And that's because you had me do the hands-on learning while you were there. You weren't doing it all.
That's right. So, you know, and some, you know, we have, you know, it used to be, oh, the kids are in the barn and they smell. Well, okay, there's pigs in there. They're going to smell.
Yeah.
We have that. So, you know, I've battled that in the back of my mind. How do I do this? Well, now we have a beautiful complex and have showers and locker rooms, and kids can shower in and shower out. We provide coveralls so kids can work and go back to English or go back to the main building, and just be super dynamic and still be what we are up on the hill. And, you know, and that's an important piece. I mean, you may or may not remember the rabbits. I mean, we went through the rabbit phase. We didn't have a lot of animals, and I had some wonderful people in the Angora rabbit business. And, you know, we took the rabbits to the state capitol. They played around on the capitol floor and on the rug. And we gave the first lady at that point was Gail Manchin. You know, we worked with one of the local artisans and blended the merino wool and the Angora, you know, from the chocolate rabbits that we had, and she in class made this beautiful scarf that we gave to the first lady.
That's so
and
cool.
Those were things about seeing you know, you have to do a project with the finish line in mind. That's hard for a lot of kids. It was very hard for me to learn how to do that in math. It was very hard for me to learn how. I still struggle with English because I write the way I speak, and
Right.
that doesn't always. I was a 11th grade English teacher's nightmare because of that. But the idea is that, and this is the philosophy, and every journey with every class with every student is different. But Mr. Lewis should be able to step away from the building to take care of life's work, whatever that is, outside of teaching, and life continues to happen as it is.
Yeah.
You know, I've had some beautiful minds. I love when kids share stories because I can't remember them all. The file is huge, and I can remember, you know, a lot of them, you know, that come to mind. But, you know, we have a program that is just plain different. And until you really get into the nuts and bolts of how different it is, you really truly don't understand it. And you know, people say, you know, Mr. Lewis, how many pig farmers have you trained in your day? I said, well, I don't know, but everybody goes to Food Line and buys pork. You know, so they're educated consumer, whether they
Yeah.
but maybe they're in human medicine. Maybe they're going to be your doctor. Maybe they're going to be your nurse. Maybe they're your dentist. Maybe they're the person that's going to care for you in the nursing home when, you know, the time comes. So those are pieces of the puzzle. The pigs and the animals that we get to work with are just a catalyst to learning. No different than the musical instruments of the band or the stage for the drama
Right.
department or, the greatest, podiums for speaking. They're just a catalyst. And the catalyst is, number one, our animals will take care of our kids. They always will. They always have. We're very, very blessed to have so many generations of our own breeding there with our females, and that's such a legacy for the program. We're now with the swine program, we're in our, this coming January will be 18 years since we've had them. We're almost to 20. So, we're churning along with this has been going on for a long time. But the reality of it to me is that, learning how to care for those animals and having a tangible relationship with them, meeting their needs and paying attention to what they're telling you, that's a life journey. That's something that's life skills 101. Like that's understanding how to be a parent. That's
For sure.
understanding how to be a neighbor. That's understanding how to be and there's no career person in the world. There's no hiring committee in the world that's going to tell you that we would like all of our candidates to have zero work ethic. Don't really care if they're on their cell phones, and they can come and go as they please and work whatever shift they want.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't exist. And so as long as we're taking care of kids and we're putting, responsibility, work ethic, dedication to a task, completing a task, those things are happening. I feel that we've done an above average job with that over the years, and saying, and the true test, and substitutes will say this from time to time, I can't believe they know how to do this. I'll tell a story on Angela Faga, who's now in veterinary school at Mississippi State, and she's a phenomenal gal, and she comes from a phenomenal family, who is very supportive of one another and just a great unit. Captain of the soccer team, just a really solid kid. But I remember the first time I ever met her mom, and it was over Thanksgiving break, and I had come back from being at the hunting camp, and I stopped in because it was her day to feed, the first day that she was there, and I was a few minutes behind her getting started. Her mom was there standing in the barn, and Angela's a 10th grader, and she's just going to work.
Yeah.
And her mom looks at me and goes, how in the world does she know how to do all this stuff?
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to our last episode.
Right.
Being able to be a lifelong learner and putting yourself in a position where there are lifelong teachers.
Yep.
And that, whether that happened in my classroom or whether that happened on my own farm at home or whether that happened on a baseball field, whatever it is, that happened. And those kids continued to come to the table. And I will tell a story, about her in her senior year. My mom was at Johns Hopkins. He was, in the latter stages of her life. She ended up passing there. And those girls, Lexi Lease and Angela, and they knew we were in the middle. This was in the middle of May, so our barns were full of babies. They knew there was a storm that was about to hit, and it happens in that May zone, where we may get scours or something. They knew something was happening. We zoomed back and forth. We talked. We, diagnosed. We got the medicines, and those girls independently ran and saved the storm.
Yeah.
It was like they built an ark, like you did. They built an ark quickly.
Yeah.
And gave so many shots every day because
That's awesome.
they were vested in the project. They were vested in the animal. They wanted success, and they were willing to make those decisions. And I can say, much like the situation you were in, those girls can look back on that situation and say, man, I wasn't sure if my toolbox was full enough, but thank God it was, and thank God he didn't leave us out on the curb by ourselves.
Yeah.
We would have made it work, but we had, some guidance, and I take a lot of pride in that from my kids. I love, I'm now teaching kids of students of students.
Yeah.
I hope I don't get to students of I taught their grandparents. I hope I don't have to hang around that long.
Yeah.
I got other things that I want to plan to do with my life, but understanding that, you have empowered them to be able to do it. And you know, some people may say, well, at times there's too many pigs, or at times there's too many lambs, or at times there's too many of this, you know, and that's where, you know, from my perspective is that we need to take this one step further than a petting zoo. We've got to make sure that that this problem solving, this development, this understanding of how to get the job done, that there's enough that can happen, because
Right.
that is where, you know, the gold gets minted into coin.
Yeah.
It's not just going through the motions every day.
Yeah.
It's when it's, you know, those speed bumps that you get that are thrown your way, and you don't know when they're coming.
Yeah.
And I've been you know, in the sheep business for 40 years, so, you know, like the good shepherd, you know, I'm still problem solving every day with them, you know, to try to figure
for
out
sure.
all the things that occurred. You know, they're you know, when they talk about, you know, Jesus being the shepherd and we being the sheep, it couldn't
Sheep
be
are a
more
lot
couldn't
more
be more
sensitive than a
parallel
lot of
couldn't be
other
more
animals,
parallel
yeah.
of a situation. But with that, though, provides an incredible amount of problem solving and learning where kids can
Yep.
understand why. And I often say this in my classroom at times. I said, you know, I could get research monkeys and they could care for the animals in the barn, but they won't be able to tell you when the animal's sick, or they won't be able to tell you that a storm is coming. They won't be able to tell you, because you as a human being have the ability to read them.
Yeah.
And that's Temple Grandin's work. She's such a phenomenal mind.
She is,
So
yeah.
wonderful. I had the opportunity to introduce my son to her last
That's so
spring
cool,
and meet
yeah.
her, and so humble she is. You know, Grandin is named after her, and that time of, you know, working with her, and of course my dad passing and Grandin being born the following year, that symbolism. But, you know, for someone that's so amazing and such a beautiful mind that she is, and God has given her an incredible level of talent that she is
Yeah.
willing to share with anybody that wants to listen, including a poor, struggling ag teacher in the state of West Virginia who had a dream that this barn could become a reality.
Yeah.
When we told her that, you know, he introduced her and shook her hand and said, "My name is Grandin," and she kind of put her head down, and he goes, "I'm named after you." And she said, "I'm just so honored that somebody would name their kid after me." You
Y'all
know,
have
of
to
all
look
the
up,
fame,
like,
all
who
the
she is. She's
fame,
amazing.
you know, all the fame
Yeah.
associated with, you know, we think of stars, like true superstars, and, you know, their reaction of, oh, let's take a picture, let's do a, you know, Instagram post, and
Yeah.
let's draw attention to it. She was just honored that somebody would name someone after her.
Yeah.
And that was just a completely different piece. But we've continued to strive with the program. Our new spay neuter program is getting up and going, and that will be a wonderful teaching module that will provide a different type of learning for our kids,
Yeah.
a more meticulous learning, because of the work there is, and we have such beautiful minds that are willing to work with us and guide us and help us in that process, and be able to provide a resource to the community and still be able to teach children.
Yeah.
You know, and
That's
I haven't even talked about, you know, in this setting, you know, how high my English scores are in my kids. I haven't talked about how low their math scores are. I haven't talked about, you know, anything about them. I've just talked about the plan.
Right.
So if you are a student that struggles, you're still going to be able to succeed in a program like this, because you are going to have the mentorship and the camaraderie and the peace, that communal peace,
Yeah.
that's so integral. And ag education has been known for that. 4-H, other youth organizations have been known for that for years.
Yeah.
This isn't new, but allowing students to be successful and have a comfort
yes.
place to come.
Yeah. And that, just like, you might not be a teacher like in a school, but you can be a leader no matter where you're at, and it should always be your goal. Like, I remember even talking with my husband, who's a business owner. Like, he wants to get to the point, and he is able to get to the point where he has taught the guys that work for him to a point where he doesn't have to be at every single job. You know what I mean? Like him and Randall still go to all the jobs and they price the jobs and they're going to oversee them, but they can send different crews to different places because they have taught them to the point where they know how to do the job and they know how to do it well. And, you know, that can go for even when it comes to discipling others. Like we should want to disciple them, we should want to teach them and mentor them to a point where they are then going on and discipling, you know, a younger generation, discipling others. So, you know, I'm able to see that some because, you know, I've started, even with like the teens that I've worked with, I started that back in 2019. So that some of them are in college now and they are now leading groups where they were like, you know, years ago they would have been like, well, that's way out of my comfort zone. So that should be our goal, to be able to teach others, just like our children. Like mine are really young right now, but yours are at a point where they're about to go off on their own. And if you failed to teach them and just did everything for them, always did their laundry, always made their meals, always, you know, took care of every little detail of their lives and didn't teach them how to do that, they'll be going out into the world and they'd be like, I have no idea what I'm doing, I can't do this, like, and it'd be really, really overwhelming. But it should be our goal as parents or as mentors to be able to teach them in a way that they're going to be successful when they leave us and go, you know, wherever they're called in their lives. So yeah, that can play out in all different dynamics in your lives. And in a verse that I was reading, so it's Deuteronomy 6:5-7. It says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk about them when you sit at your house and when you walk by the way and when you lie down and when you rise. And this is talking about loving God first and foremost. So that should be our goal first and foremost in our lives. But no matter what we're teaching, you know, the children in our lives, it's saying like, teach them as you sit at your house, as you walk by the way, as you lie down, as you rise up. So like in all different aspects, it doesn't just have to be in a classroom that you're teaching a child. Like you should be teaching them in the barn as you're doing things like, hey, this is why we do what we do. This is how we care for others. And I just know, like, even growing up on a farm, we had to go and take care of our animals before we went and had breakfast in the mornings. And so that taught us, like, a little bit of humility and a good work ethic too, to learn, okay, it's not just about you. You do have to take care of others. They are fully relying on you. That's played into my motherhood too. Like, these children are fully relying on me. Like, my 4-year-old is just getting, you know, more and more independent with things, but like, thankfully she can now dress herself. That makes getting ready a whole lot easier. But if I didn't take the time to teach her that would be so much on my plate too, to do every little thing for them. So yeah, just I love what you're doing and being a lifelong teacher to these kids. And that can be, you know, inside your home and in the school, and as you're going to these shows, you know, all the different things that you're doing, you're able to teach others and make them better for it.
And I think the other piece too is the more that we teach, the more that we encourage the thought that learning is okay.
Yeah.
You know, we say, why do kids not want to go to school? Why do kids not want to do this? And we can point fingers at a lot of different reasons for that. And 100% of that can't be the system that they're in. It is the fact that, you know, if you encourage teaching, then you will value the learning. Yeah. And those are things that have to work in hand. And you got to throw in a ton of humility and empathy and compassion and care along the way. You know, and some days I'm an edutainer. I'm not an educator. You know, I have to just say today is a day where we're going to work on little victories. And one of the things that's always fun, I love this activity. The first thing that kids do in my class is they have to make their bed for 14 days straight. Yeah. So at home. And their parents have to give them a grade. And I love the feedback. That's like funny, some parents are like, I've been trying to do this for their entire life and they've never made their bed. Some of them are like, I don't understand how this has to do with with teaching. I don't understand what this has to do with animals. You know, you're supposed to be teaching about animals, not how to make their bed. And I'm a soul believer. I'm a very soul believer. And again, if my wife was here, she would probably give everybody the no on this, because, you know, I don't always comply with everything that I know it's the right thing to do, but, you know, some days I just don't.
Yeah.
But you know, in order to do the big things well, you got to do the little things well.
Yep. You got to learn
Because
discipline
working
in
with
your
animals,
lives. Yeah.
especially in my area, or working on a project or working on a goal, there's going to be lasagna layers, that project based, that you have to do in order to complete that task. It's not like, you know, Dakota goes out and says, all right, boys, show up. Here's all the lumber. Just go and start building.
Yeah.
There has to be a lot of planning and implementation and understanding before you get there. And if you can make your bed for 14 days, it shows me that you can complete a minor task. And if you're tired at the end of the day, you can come home. There's a great general that talked at the University of Texas graduation. I love showing him, you know, to the students at times, because he talks about, you know, one of the things about the military is being able to do the little things very well. And little things turn into big things that you can do well. And then you have the ability to rely on other people to do their job well, so your job can be done well. And those are great pieces of the puzzle. I mean, and we used to have a bed making competition. I unfortunately have all of our mattresses put away for fostering, so I didn't have one this year, but I'll bring it in and we'll show them exactly how to make the bed. This is exactly, and this is why you fold your pillowcase, you know, end away from the doorway, so the bacteria doesn't come in. You know,
4-H camp. I don't know if they still do that, but that used to be
bed
a competition.
check, and you got best bed and cabin, whatever, and those were part of it. But it's part of the little, being able to do the little things and not skipping a step. And washing a dog seems like a very minor, minuscule task until we take responsibility for someone's pride and joy,
right,
that they love more than their own kids, and we're going to bathe and clip and take care of him. Maybe he's going to growl and bite us the whole time, but we have that responsibility. So every time we bathe the dog, we have to do it the same way,
right,
because we need the same result at the end. And that standard operating procedure is so important. But I love that activity. I don't make our bed every day. I'm sorry. Maybe I outgrew that task. My wife would probably love that I would make it every day, because I'm the last one up, because she's an early stirrer. She gets up way too early for me. But those are the things, you know, and you know that I can honestly say that I've seen journeys. I've had kids that on first impressions, I thought, there is no way this is going to work. But God, give me a sign. Give me one thing that's going to help me relate to this kid, because I think there's something really good there, that this kid really needs to work with animals. And give me that sign, and then it may take a while, and then boom, the light comes on, and now we're clicking. Maturity is part of that, and there's other pieces that play into the puzzle, but you know, you love it. You just flat love it. You know, we travel and show, and is it about winning? We've been very successful over the years with the hogs, and you know, as a report card, and winning, and you know, kids that have never had the opportunity to participate in the county fair have a place where they can learn. You know, I've taken kids to dinner who've never ordered for themselves in a restaurant.
Yeah.
You know, we think about that as being a very normal thing. Kids should be able to look at a menu, but some family dynamics, you know, they don't have the finances. Okay, you guys are all getting chicken tenders, because and we're getting 2 plates, and all 3 of you are going to eat from those 2 plates, because that's what we can afford if we're going to come out. And so those are important. We try really super hard in the program to celebrate every child. And that means that every child is going to have a victory, a good, solid victory. Whether that means that they did something on the athletic team, we're going to celebrate them. Tell me something good. Tell me something good. What happened last night? Or whether they do something in class that's absolutely astonishing, whether they do something in the community, maybe it's their birthday, whatever it is, celebrate that kid. You know, I grew up in a small community with a small elementary school, and I remember we had kids from all forms of socioeconomic status in that classroom, all the way through. We're the same all 4 grades for the most part. And I remember birthdays. Like we celebrated birthdays. And if Johnny's mom and dad didn't have the resources to get 21 cupcakes made, my grandmother or people in the community would make sure that
Right.
21 cupcakes were there. And we celebrated Johnny. Johnny got to be first in line. Johnny got to be celebrated. And, and Johnny got to go first in the lunch line. And it was Johnny Day. We still got education done, but it was Johnny Day. And so that's tough because I've run into kids who've never in their life have had a victory. Like they've worked really hard, or maybe they just need that push for a victory. And we try really hard for solid victories amongst our kids. And some of those victories come at graduation. Some kids are saying, Mr. Lewis, the only reason I come to school is because of that barn. I had a student it's been almost 10 years ago now that, unfortunately had a family argument, was living in his car, didn't have a place to live. It got cold and he was sleeping in the barn on the show box. I find him in the middle of, the winter going to check a sow in the middle of the night.
Wow.
That kid, every morning I would show up in the morning for school and I'd be like, this barn's really clean, man. Things are nice around here. What is going on? We'd have cameras in those days. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And the sows were always cared for. The babies were always cared for. The barn became his home place, and that was a safe place for him. Luckily, things worked out beautifully for him.
Yeah.
I had a young student, Bernie Shank, and Bernie and I are still very, very close. You remember Bernie?
Yeah.
Bernie's father passed away while he was in high school, and Bernie's mother learned to drive in my dad's Dodge Dart, and we didn't know this, and I took Bernie all over the
wow.
country. But Bernie and his wife met in my class. It seems like it's like Romance Central. I don't know what's going on, all that talk about animals, and we have all these relationships that bloom in the ag building. But Bernie had a real talent, a real joy for being around the animals, and he said, my dad, and Bernie wouldn't mind for me to share this, but he didn't know that, like, he wanted his dad to see the barn so bad, to see what he was doing, and because of the pulmonary issues that he had, he was pretty much bedridden and couldn't go. And I finally looked at the kids one day and I'm like, Bernie, how's Dad? Well, Dad's not doing too well. I'm going to go home and check on him. And as soon as he left, I said, boys, get up there in the barn, get me 3 baby pigs. We're going for a ride.
Aww.
And we took him down and put him on his bed and let him see
so
them
cool.
and enjoy that. And Bernie felt connected to his dad because I became that type of a figure for him because it was such a tumultuous piece of his life. And again, people say, are you in the pig business? I'm not in the pig business. I'm in the kid business.
Yeah.
I just happen to have pigs. And this is an example of that where, he just wanted his dad to know that this was real because it was so only lived in pictures or movies at that point. And, I would have loved to have had the opportunity to bring Doug up to the school to see
that's
to
cool.
understand what Bernie was so actively wanting to be a part of and such a big part of it.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal thing, and showing livestock is a wonderful outreach and educational piece. It becomes such a part of it, and it seems like it's minor, but it's such an important part where kids get to talk about something they're passionate about.
Right.
And they get to share that with other people at the shows and do the educational pieces of it. It's such a big piece of the mature, and not every parent has the finances to buy animals. And we've had kids that raise their ham bacon hogs over here. What a wonderful program, and the community supports such a heavily way, and the kids have been able to keep their pigs there in the building and be able to participate and have that income that they need to buy a vehicle to become independent, pay for college, be independent, be a successful person. You don't invest in the ham itself, you invest in the kid who produced it. And that's such an important part of the circle of our culture that's so good.
That's good. Okay, so our last set of questions here. So What are some things you feel like is working? And I know we talked before and you're like, I did not want to put down the school system, and that's great, and I respect you for that.
Yeah.
What are some things that you feel like are working well, and what are some things that you would like to improve in the educational space? And you can go as brief or in depth as you want to with
Well,
that.
I mean, educational trust is such a huge piece for parents to maneuver. And that's, we can talk about the elephant in the room, and that is that people, feel the need to homeschool. People feel the need to put their students in a charter school or private
Right.
school. They feel the need to that they want their kids in a public school. The biggest piece of the educational process is that learning has to be an everyday occurrence regardless of where the kid is. And
Right.
that means that learning occurs. And I'll use this as an example. One of the things that church taught me, and we use church as an example, and this is one of God's given talents that I knew at a very young age how to sit in a space for 50 minutes. Okay, I grew up in a Methodist church. That means we have 55 minutes. We're getting 3 hymns, we're taking care of the business, and we're having a sermon, and we're going to talk about a little bit of scripture, and we're out of here. We've got to get to the restaurant before the Baptist dismiss 5 minutes after us. Okay, because there were only 2 restaurants in town and we had to get a table. All right, that's how I grew up. So the expectation for me was I knew how to sit for 55 minutes in a church, which translated to Isaac knows how to sit through a funeral. Isaac knows how to sit through a wedding. Isaac knows how to sit still. And that taught me those pieces weren't things that you learn in the classroom. It didn't happen. The classroom at that point in time was the church.
Right.
The same way I learned that trout don't bite as soon as you throw the hook in.
Yeah.
You have to have a little bit of patience. You have to learn to occupy your time, and so learning, and we talked about lifelong learners and lifelong teachers, and that becomes when being able to take a piece of knowledge and put it into to learn it and tuck it away, when that becomes the normalcy of society, it doesn't matter what system you're in, you're going to succeed. I mean, I've been blessed with some of the hardest working kids you could ever have that weren't academically superstars. I've been blessed with academic superstars who were phenomenal.
Right.
I've had them all. I've had students who their lives have been very tough from the day they were born to the day that I get them at 14 years old. I've had students who have had, everything that life could imagine, until they were 14 years old. The reality of it becomes is the system will work because there are people all across the country who choose to be educators, wherever you choose to be an educator, that are willing to say, this is how this is done. This is how we do things. This is the structure that we live in. And like I said, if I could take the teachers that I have taught with, some of the most beautiful and brilliant minds that I have taught with in 27 years, and administrators that I've had the opportunity to work with, and leaders that I've had the opportunity to work with, and I could create a school, it would be unstoppable.
Yeah.
It's not that we're saying this is this and this is this. We, at some point along the way, decided that the only people that can teach a child is a teacher.
Right.
And that's where we took learning as a priority and made it a secondary to everything else.
Right. It does need to be
When I grew
first,
up, being an elementary school teacher was like noble. Like we looked up to them. They were like, Mrs. I love it. Mrs. Umstadt, Polly Umstadt, what a phenomenal, brilliant mind she was. Her first year of teaching was my mom, and her last year of teaching was me.
Oh, wow, that's
so we
cool.
went full cycle with her.
Yeah.
But and even after her retirement, it was like, Mrs. Umstadt, so good to see you. Thank you for what you did for me. I remember we did this at the Old Fort, or Mrs. Batchelor, we did. I still remember their names.
Yeah.
I think that we get to the point today where if I took my senior class and said, I need you to name every teacher you've had all the way through, some of them might struggle just because of situations at hand or things at home or life's busy. And,
Right.
I think that learning is great. I feel good about where we are and where we want to go. Because there's a book called Good to Great, and it's a phenomenal book
Okay.
that really talks about, you know, good means that we're getting the job done and we're taking care of kids. Moving to greatness requires a total investment.
Yeah.
And that total investment comes from everybody in the community. It's not just financial, because we've got businesses, small businesses and families that are, well, I mean, we have a turf field, we have beautiful, you know, we have a small college environment, we have a vet science program, we have 4 ag teachers, we have, you know, the marching band is continuing to grow and expand, and I love it. I love it all. We have teachers, you know, we have newsletters, we have, you know, we're putting out things that are just absolutely stunning, you know, things that are happening in the school. And the best piece of this puzzle is when people in the community come to the table. You know,
Yeah.
I tell my graduates all the time, just because we give you a diploma doesn't mean the door is shut. This building will
Right.
always be your building.
Right.
This program
That's
will
good.
always be your program. You know, and when the time is right for you, you know, much is given, much is expected. We want you to come back to the table. We want you to come back to,
Yeah.
you know, to be a part of, be a guest speaker, to be a, you know, part of the big picture, to be
Yeah.
supportive of the program and bring your expertise, because you know, I learned very quickly that I don't know everything about everything,
Right.
and I'm willing to go find the people that are good at it, and
Yeah.
if I do, then the kids that are in my program are going to be successful.
That's
you know,
great.
and so
Yeah.
it's, you know, and again, you know, I have been able to grow and develop as an educator because I've had supportive people on my court, and I've had a community that's willing to get behind me. It doesn't mean that it's all roses and butterflies and glitter and unicorns.
Right.
It just means that I've had support,
Yeah.
and that's the number one thing. And be able to grow and build and convince other people that this is necessary here
Yeah.
in rural West Virginia
Yeah.
is a big task that I don't take, you know, very lightly, because
Yeah.
it's hard to do. But you know, if your story is 100, I've always said this in education, if what you do is about your students and about the kids, everything else will fall in line.
Yeah.
It's about them. I don't need, and I tell the kids every day, I don't need to know how to feed animals. I can go home and do that every day. I do
Yeah.
that every evening when I get home. So this is about your journey. It's about
Yes.
your development. I'm not leaving you here with an empty toolbox. I'm going to build that toolbox
Yep.
every day we're here. But
That's great.
being able to do that, and the great educators, regardless of what system they're in or where they are going to do the same thing. They're going to make English talk to the kid. And we have some great teachers that are doing
do.
some cool things and bringing things to life. And you know, I have 3 colleagues in the ag department that are all doing very different related agricultural things, and
Yeah.
a supportive community that helps.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah, and just an encouragement for parents. I would encourage parents to like be in relationship with your child's teacher, and to figure out like, and show, don't let, because I've seen this before too, like don't let your child hear you talking down about the teacher. No teacher's perfect, but like if they hear that, then they aren't going to respect their teacher how they should, and they're not going to learn as much from them. So like being supportive of the teacher, and just asking like how you can be involved, what you can do at home to support what they're teaching, because it does take a whole village to do that well.
Right. And I like to call home, and when I call home, you know, it's always fun, because I'm one of those, when I have the time and I do this, I call home and say, you know, your kid is knocking at, well, first thing this is Mr. Lewis from the Animal Vet Science Department calling, I'm so-and-so's teacher. Well, what do they do now?
Yeah.
What do they do now? No, I'm calling to tell you as a parent, I enjoy having your kid in class and they're knocking it out of the park, and
That's
this is what they're
great
able to
that
do.
you make those
Because
phone
it doesn't,
calls.
you know, every phone call that, you know, when they see the caller ID, it's Hampshire High School. It's so negative. It's not about that, you know. And you know, I like dropping notes to say, "Caught you doing something good," and you know, and celebrating kids' victories
Yeah.
outside of my classroom builds inclusion in the classroom. They
For
feel
sure.
like everybody's a part. And
Yeah.
I try to do lessons that bring about like one of the things we do is we do a storybook, and that's not everybody's cup of tea. They have to take the animal terms at the beginning, and they draft a children's book for kindergartners
Cool.
using the terms about animals.
Right.
And they have to teach a kindergarten level they have to create a book that's at kindergarten level skills, like ABCs and colors and counting and
Yeah, that's
shapes.
so cool.
And you know, in kindergarten they teach you the social emotional things about, you know, space and privacy and, you know, being, you know, I always think of I use the Pokey Little Puppy as an example, the golden book that has sold so many copies, that, you know, about a puppy that's always getting in trouble. And so they have to pick a theme and they create a book. And it is absolutely stunning to watch the kids who, you know, this is so outside the box for them a little bit, because, you know, maybe they're not an artist, but then there's the student that's next to them that's an artist, and how they lift each other up in the project and say, you know, well, maybe try this, you know, or maybe try this. And some of the kids who get really deep rooted in the content, you know, because they keep an eye on their audience. It's a very wonderful journey. We take those books and give them to the kindergarten classes, and they read them and talk about,
really
you know,
cool.
some of them are a little bit hot. Some of them, the kids get really into it and they kind of get to third or fourth grade because they get wordy. But, you know, we try to think about a kindergartner's mind. So they think about other people, not just themselves.
Teach well,
and not think about themselves all the time. I got to take you out of your comfort zone, because you know how teenagers are, but you don't know how a kindergartner is,
right?
Unless you have kindergarten siblings or whatever,
right?
And there's been some beautiful books. I would love to get some of those published at some point and honor some of those wonderful kids who were. And we have some wonderful children's books, illustrators and writers here in the community. But it would be a phenomenal way to do that. But for them to think about animal science from a different point of view. What's a kindergartner's view?
Yeah.
Because if you think about a kindergartner's view, then you've already learned how to teach a kindergartner. And when you learn how to teach a kindergartner, which for some teenagers is very polar, they're opposites on the spectrum. They don't want to. Most teenagers don't want to be around a kindergartner. It's just not. They're not on the same wavelength. But if they can think about that, then they can think about, you know, okay, yeah, I can teach, and I do have the ability, and I've conquered this task. Now I'm ready for the next task, and the next task, and the next task might be a little harder, and before you know it, you're through the semester, and you hope that the next time they check the box that they're back with you for another semester and another semester. And some kids, you know, they just want to be there all day. It's some kids don't want to be there all day, and that's okay too. They learn. You know, I've had kids come in and say, "I want to be a vet," till we get the needles out, and then it's like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. I think I'll do a different path. So or they overcome the fear of that and they become your phlebotomist at the hospital. So I've had that journey too, that's
cool.
Which is great.
Okay, so last question: how can our listeners be praying for you?
Well, after they've listened to both podcasts, they're probably praying, because we've spent a lot of time chewing on this elephant that we have, and it is a big topic. How can they pray for me? Well, you know, first and foremost, pray for my family. You know, pray for my my wife, because you know you know, the world in most cases gets the most of me, and they get what's left of me, and that is that, you know, maybe Dad's cranky and he's short fused, and you know, and or maybe he's, you know, tired and he can't stay up to talk about family matters just because he's worn out. You know, pray for them, you know, and know that that's, you know, that's the reality of life for us. You know, I always say that, you know, every child is a victory. Every child has a meaning. Every child has a task. Every child there's a plan, and I believe in that. And I've through all the trials and tribulations of, you know, losing my parents, of being divorced, of handling situations with my kids, to, you know, my job and the things that come about with that. You know, I have always felt, I don't know what the reason is, but we're moving forward, and make sure you put me on the right path. And most importantly, I would tell you to pray for yourself. If you don't pray for anybody else, you know, understand that, you know, the journey that one takes is, you know, you're not going to be able to take your tailgate buddies at the Mountaineer game with you when you cross the bridge.
Right.
You're not going to be able to take your hunting club buddies with you when you cross the bridge. You're not going to be
Yeah.
able to take all your students with you when you cross the bridge. And you won't be able to take your spouse with you or your children with you. So when it's time for that to occur, recognize that, you know, you've got your checks and balances in line, that you're prepared for that. And whatever that journey is for you, you know, there's a lesson plan for it. You know, it's a lot of scripture and a lot of words and a lot of stories and parables
Yeah.
to help guide you in that direction.
Yeah.
But you are the only person that can take that journey, and you will do that. It's one of the very few things that you will ever do, you know, on your own.
Yeah.
And
It's about,
you have to
having
understand that,
relationship.
and understand that, and understand at times it's okay. You know, one of the things that I do when I umpire and I go into Virginia to work, I'm very blessed to work in a wonderful conference. I spend a lot of time in the car. So I have the opportunity to defuse things and think about things and process things. It's okay for you to take time to have a relationship with God and have
Yeah, for sure.
and again, whether that is out on the most important hiking spot you've ever been to, or whether that's out on your tractor, you know, cutting combine, or whether that's, you know, delivering a calf, or whether that's the cold frosty morning that you got to get to the school, or riding in a car to Shenandoah University, whatever it is, that you have taken the time to make sure that your checks and balances are in line. And that means that once you step across the bridge and you wave at everybody and say, life's about to get really, really good for me, that they're going to be able to be able to continue by faith.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing. I became very close to faith individually after losing my parents, because I knew, you know, you lose your dad and you're like, oh, this is like I lost an arm, like we were co-workers, and you know, and he was tough on me, you know, but I lost part of my arm. I tell people I lost my arm, but when you lose your mama, like it is a different piece. And for me, it was like I just got to have faith that if I do the things that I need to do in a godly way, and I do them in a way that is, you know, that I know when I need to repent and I know when I need to rejoice. Two words that are very commonly used in the Bible, you know, that, and we don't rejoice more than we repent at times, you know, we don't let things take us over, that we will be able to, that, you know, I will get to see those wonderful people on the other side. And, you know, and some of that discovery has happened, you know, probably in the last 5 years. And when people, you know, come to me and say, you know, Mr. Lewis, I would like you to speak my funeral. That's a huge task, you know, because, you know, I grew up, you know, with preachers who were very talented and could do that. And to be asked to do that, to be asked to help people in their lowest time to get across the grieving process and go through the process of that and be able to make that as real as possible is a big piece of the puzzle. So, you know, pray for yourself.
Yeah.
Pray for me. Pray for the people that need prayer. And the reality of it is that everybody needs it. You know, there's nobody on earth. You know, you're going to need it in a few weeks here as you start the next journey.
Yeah.
You know, praying that, you know, things go as, and it's not just the having of the baby that's the hard, we're going to pray you through that.
Yeah.
But we're going to pray for you for 21 more years after that.
Yeah,
because you're going to need it, you know, because you got other little ones and you're going to have, you know, personalities and people come in and out of your life. And, but, you know, understanding that education is a process that we as a culture have to practice.
Yeah.
And we have to allow God to help us do that, regardless of what school system you choose to put your child, that education is going to be just as meaningful as it was for me, for Stu, to teach me how to tie a knot the right way, as it was for some of the greatest minds in animal science that I had the opportunity to mentor under.
Right.
Or whether it was the custodian that always handed the one kid in line that quarter because he knew that she didn't have money for milk in the lunch line.
Right.
Whether it's the custodian that checked the locker that just didn't seem right, or whether it's the cook that recognized that someone didn't eat that day, or whether it's the person in the hallway that recognizes that something just isn't where it needs to be. We have, that education, that learning, that we've put that in the right place.
Yeah. Well, let me pray for us real quick to end us off. God, we love you, and we just thank you so much for Isaac and just his willingness to share with us about, all the things that they have walked through. I just pray for your blessings over their family. I just pray that you'll really renew their strength. I pray that he'll be able to just spend that intentional time with his family, and that you will just open the doors for those things to happen. And then for all of our listeners, I pray that they will listen to what he said, and the fact that it is about a personal relationship with you, God. And, nobody else can do that for us. Nobody can choose to, as your word says, take up your cross daily and follow you. And I just pray that everybody will make that a priority in their lives, and to seek you and follow you, and just be obedient to all the different things that you call us to. We know that they are going to look difficult at times, and we are just going to trust you for the strength to make it through. God, we just thank you for being a good father to us. Thank you for loving us well, and we just pray that you will continue to guide and direct us each and every step of the way. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode with Mr. Isaac Lewis. And I hope that it challenged you guys to be a lifelong teacher and a lifelong learner. And, maybe if you're like, my schedule is way too busy to be a teacher or, learn another thing, really just look at it and say, what can I take out of my schedule maybe that doesn't need to be there, and what can I add? And, things that you can add could be just simple teaching opportunities to the children, or just anybody younger in your life. Like, it could be about just inviting them into your home and just letting them see you parent, or do life with your spouse, or just do life as a single person, just whatever that looks like. And then maybe if you're in a position where you can start discipling others and teach them more about Christ, fitting that in your schedule, even if it's just something like once a month. That's how often I meet with the lady that disciples me. And so, just pray about that God will reveal any opportunities for you to be able to pour into the younger generation, and also for you to be poured into so you can learn more. If you guys have any prayer requests, as always, send them to me. So we have this week's episode, and then I'm going to do a Q&A the following week. And then my new baby will be here at that point. So we're really excited for that. And so I am going to take some time off just to get some extra time with the baby. That way I won't have to leave him or her whenever I go and record episodes. And so I may record a few here and there, whether that's Q&A episodes or like devotional style episodes to share with you guys. But we will start back up our regular podcast episodes with people sharing their testimonies and stuff in 2026. So in January. So if you guys have anybody that you would like to be on the podcast, share that with me. If you feel like God is laying on your heart to share, also reach out. I've already talked to a few people that we have lined up for January's episodes. So I'll be reaching out to a few more just to plan out what our year's going to look like next year. Thank you guys for supporting the podcast this far. We'll talk about it the following week, but we are a year into it, and I'm really thankful for just the support and how God's been using it to hopefully grow others closer to Him. All right, guys, have a great week, and we will see you here next week for another episode.